Humans, eh? We're a complicated species. We've worked out how to communicate by developing language in the written word. We've eradicated numerous diseases with extraordinary medical developments. We've quite literally been to the moon and back. So why on earth do we struggle to have basic conversations about our bodies? These incredible packages of blood and flesh and bone that make it possible for us to navigate and experience life and all the wonders in it. But there are some absolute certainties that every single human being on this planet will experience. And a certainty for all females who reach adulthood.
I feel like I'm losing my mind.
My body feels like I got hit by a bus.
My bones ache. I've got brain fog at work and memory loss.
I keep on repeating myself.
My libido is non-existent.
I'm suffering from panic attacks.
Dripping with sweat. I am forever mopping my face during meetings. It's just really embarrassing.
I can't stop gaining weight.
All my joints are painful.
It is impossible to sleep.
The menopause. Be honest. How does it make you feel hearing that word? Uncomfortable? Intrigued, maybe? The brilliantly British reaction is often to sweep the menopause and all who sail in her under the carpet by the front door of embarrassing body topics. No doubt the common symptoms of hot flushes, night sweats, brain fog and weight gain do very little to add to the attraction. Well, today I invite you to walk through that door with me, reassured that we'll be accompanied on our journey by a group of wonderful women, and one man, who will talk openly and honestly about this inevitable part of our journey as adult females. As you can imagine, there will be some fairly frank conversations about the body and its workings within this programme. There is much we can do to make the menopause manageable. So if you want to learn with me, don't press menopause, press play. Sorry, they do say humour is the best medicine, don't they?
The menopause. Well, some might say the fairer sex, we really have it tough. With periods and pregnancy, you'd think that was enough. Mother Nature, what a laugh. You really are a blast. You then serve up the menopause and save the best till last. Remember when our sex lives made our toes curl, left us damp? Well, now we rarely do the deed and end up with foot cramp. We toss and turn all night, we're all incurable insomniacs. We used to all be nymphos, but now sadly we're just maniacs. We don't know where we park the car because of foggy brain, and water is the only thing these days that we retain. Our hair is getting thinner, not to mention our dry skin. We wonder why our eyebrows have migrated to our chin. Weight gain, sagging triceps, droopy boobs and palpitations, frequent night trips to the loo and other complications. Mother Nature, the hot flush? That joke is cheap and shoddy. That's not what we meant when we requested a hot body. So we'll grow old disgracefully and we won't even care, cause havoc in the nursing home. We'll drink and smoke and swear. And when we're back in nappies and our teeth are in a glass, we'll be shouting, Mother Nature, you can kiss my wrinkly ass.
That was the completely brilliant Mrs. Yorkshire, the baking bard, and her take on the menopause. And that is what we're talking about in this podcast today. I'm joined in the studio by a number of people for different reasons. So we've got Joanne Posey with us, who's a registered nutritionist. We've got Belinda Pilling, who is someone who has her own experience with the menopause that she is happy to share with us. We have our own Howard Caine. Hello, Howard.
Hello, yeah.
What are you doing here?
I'm your token man.
You play that role so well,
Thank you.
I have to say. And we'll hear from a number of different voices over the course of this programme as well, who will hopefully be able to help us with this topic that, let's face it, has been considered until recently to be quite taboo. I think, Joanne, that would be a fairly fair assumption, wouldn't it? That until recently, this is not something people have really talked about.
No, it's not. Or if they have, they've been in chat rooms online or even amongst girlfriends? Were those conversations even happening? I don't even know that they were, other than women sitting fanning themselves together, but none of the real nitty-gritty discussions around actually what's going on in the body. And I don't know whether part of that is the embarrassment, but also part of it is not associating the whole range of symptoms with actually, oh yeah, that'll be your hormones.
And there are such an incredible range of symptoms. We were just talking about this on Late Lunch, in fact, and on the show what I did was I found a few of these groups that you mentioned, and I made a list of just a couple of the posts that were made in these groups from a range of different women who were talking about things they were going through. So, for instance, I thought I was losing my mind, one woman said. Another said, my body feels like I got hit by a bus. Another, my bones ache. I have brain fog. I've got memory loss. I keep repeating myself. My hair is falling out. My libido is non-existent. I'm suffering from panic attacks. I'm dripping with sweat. I'm forever mopping my face during meetings. It's impossible to sleep. My joints are painful. I'm putting on weight, etc., etc., etc. The list seems to be endless. And I've got to say, none of these symptoms are particularly nice. I mean, I'm not there yet, but I am getting close to that age. I'm just going to ask both of you, Joanne and Belinda together, if you don't mind sharing a bit about yourselves. Would you mind telling me where you're at, Jo, with your menopause journey as such?
I had my last period when I was 47, I think. I'm now 51, so menopause defined as being without a cycle for 12 months. So I am out to the other side, as it were. They're still experiencing some symptoms, but not incredibly debilitating ones, thankfully.
And are you using anything like HRT, or obviously being a nutritionist, I take it you're looking after your diet?
Yes, diet obviously is central for me. A whole ton of different supplements. I am taking a tablet called Vagifem, and that is a form of HRT, and that's a pessary that you insert vaginally, as the name suggests, and that is to counteract the vaginal atrophy that happens over time,
which is another lovely symptom.
Which is another lovely symptom.
Yeah.
And that tablet, it's localized only, so it doesn't go into your system, but it restores the tissue and the mucous membranes.
Wow, that's quite something.
Yeah, it's very, very, very effective. Yet vaginal atrophy obviously can make sex very painful, but also can cause urinary problems because the effects are felt in the urinary tract and sometimes the bladder as well. So you can get recurrent UTIs. And to say, the Vagifem certainly for me has been helpful. As I say, it just replenishes the whole area.
And, you know, listening to that poem from the Baking Bard there, I know that was sort of a comical take on it, but as Jo was saying there, these symptoms can be really debilitating. Belinda Pilling, would you mind sharing us where you're at with your journey with the menopause?
Yes, I'm 67. I had my last period at 52. I'm still on HRT. I struggled on for 2 years using alternative therapies, and I was a complete and utter mess with hot flushes every 20 minutes, no sleep, trying to work full time. I had a very sympathetic late husband who was a GP who finally persuaded me to go to my own GP, and I've had several different types of HRT now, and quite frankly I'd never want to come off them. I have tried several times, but it's a question of quality of life, and I have a very sympathetic GP now.
Which is very good to hear, because I think it is something that perhaps it's still sort of getting out there in the sort of world
very
of GPs, so. Isn't it?
Yes.
You said your husband was very sympathetic,
yes.
Later was very sympathetic. What was his sort of take on it as a GP himself?
At that time, he very much wanted to prescribe HRT because he felt that the information that was coming out, which was against HRT with all the so-called cardiac risks and other things, wasn't completely accurate. So yes, he did prescribe it, and fortunately his partner, who was my GP at the time, was very sympathetic as well. I think I'd have gone insane, quite frankly, and ended up on antidepressants if I hadn't been able to take it.
Which is another thing that actually you do see people mentioning that on some of the groups.
Dreadful. And the other thing that helped me at the time was meditation. I did a course on meditation for 8 weeks, and I still do that.
And psychological effects or something again, which are highlighted quite a lot. I mean, Howard, as our token man, how does it make you feel hearing about things like this? I mean, were you surprised by some of the things that you're hearing?
No, I'm not entirely surprised because I am aware of the menopause. I'm aware of a lot of the symptoms that are experienced. I was going to, just hearing from what Belinda was saying there as well, and obviously with your late husband being a GP, is going to have an understanding. I was wondering whether there has been a change, or is this a real difficulty for a lot of women, clearly in partnerships, married or otherwise, and their partners really don't appreciate what they might be going through.
They probably don't appreciate it. I do have a healthcare background as well, so I was well aware of what the symptoms would be. But when you're actually going through it, you are not rational a lot of the time. I'm convinced of it. It's the tiredness.
Yeah,
it's exhausting not getting any sleep and trying to work full time and run a family.
I think it's very much a mixed bag. Certainly, if you belong to those various groups, some of us have, and I'm very fortunate to have an incredibly supportive husband. If we talk about it really in any negative way, it's we're joking about it, and I think sometimes that's the only way, really.
That's often a good way. I mean, humour can always be a good leveller from that point of view.
Absolutely. He will. When I was badly flushing back in the day, he would kind of, hang on a minute, and he'd rub his hands and hold them out to warm them up, and it was funny. It was funny. So, and it's, as you say, it diffuses it, and you just have that sense that you're in it together. But then lots of other relationships go completely off track, and a sense of it being exaggerated or making excuses, or couples separate.
Yeah. Yes. And what about, Belinda, your network of friends then who may have gone through this themselves as well?
I think I'm probably one of the worst cases. I would say the majority of my friends have had some of the symptoms, and I've got 2 or 3 who just sailed through what's menopause, stopped my periods, and that was it. I wish, but I think the majority of women do have some symptoms. And I also think at my time, when we were going through, it really wasn't discussed, and I think today it needs to be out in the open far more, because I think women are in much more responsible positions at work. They've got families. I had elderly parents at the time, and you're trying to cope with everything, and you think, I'm just being stupid, it's not the menopause, I'm just tired, and you battle on for ages. And I think if it's out there now, then people will appreciate it more and be more sympathetic.
We'll return to the studio shortly. But now I want to bring in another voice, someone with 20 years' experience supporting and empowering women, and who I brought in to answer some of the most basic questions we might have about the menopause, like, what even is this thing?
My name's Dr. Ella Russell. I'm a GP based in West Yorkshire, and I specialise in all things perimenopause and menopause, so supporting women through this journey in their lives.
Which is still something of a bit of a maze, it has to be said. So I'm going to ask you first of all, if it's okay, just explain to us what actually is the menopause, what is happening to our bodies?
Yes, okay. So, the menopause, the first thing to remember is that the menopause is a natural process that all women will go through in their lives. And basically what happens is, as we get older, our ovaries don't work as well as they were doing sort of 20, 30 years ago. So we stop producing eggs, so obviously we sort of stop being able to get pregnant. But more importantly, for the menopause sort of symptoms, the estrogen levels that we produce from our bodies reduce and actually sort of really peter off. And it's that estrogen deficiency that causes all of the symptoms and the problems associated with sort of the journey through the menopause, but also sort of has some long-term health risks associated with it as well.
And of course, I'm sure that no 2 women are going to have the same experience because, of course, we are all individual. But what sort of symptoms can we sort of expect, I suppose, that are most common?
Yeah, okay. So all ladies will generally start to become perimenopausal in their sort of early or mid-40s, if you like. And there are really common symptoms that a lot of people will experience. So over 80% of women will talk about experiencing hot flushes or flashes, depending on which area of the world you come from. Over 65% will talk about sort of overwhelming fatigue and tiredness, which may be exacerbated by not sleeping very well, which is also really common. I know as well that anxiety and mood problems are really common in the perimenopause and the menopause, but weight gain is reported by over sort of 65% of women. And unfortunately, a significant proportion of those ladies will say that they will gain sort of 1 to 1.5 stone as they go through their perimenopause and menopause, which it really has an impact on people's sort of psychological and physical well-being.
It does, doesn't it? And it's only one of those many symptoms that can affect us psychologically, I think, because a lot of the ones that it seems like we can expect, like you said, fatigue, which of course is going to affect us psychologically. You've got sort of the visual symptoms, whether it's sort of sweating or, sort of hot flushes, like you say. Added to this, the weight gain. I mean, that is going to have a massive psychological impact on us, isn't it?
It does. And I think we need to recognise this. And I think this is what this research has really highlighted, that a lot of women know that they might put some weight on, but actually they probably don't realise the extent to the weight gain that they could experience. And also, as you say, our body shape changes. So we go from being this typical sort of pear-shaped, if you like, to being a bit more apple-shaped. So we tend to put the weight on around the middle, the old middle-age spread, as people call it. But it tends to accumulate around there. And that really can be really difficult for lots of women to kind of come to terms with this. Not only have they gained weight, that their body shape's changed, and they what they can wear and what other people may see when they're looking at them has changed. And that at a time in her life when she may be sort of struggling with psychological symptoms anyway, and sort of exhaustion and fatigue. That lack of confidence that women talk about is really profound. And in fact, 1 in 10 women in this research talked about the fact that actually their confidence was at an all-time low as they transitioned through the perimenopause and menopause.
Many thanks to Dr. Ella Russell for sharing her years of experience with us. You can find her at yorkshiremenopausedoctor.co.uk. Some heavy points to consider, but don't be downhearted. There is, as Ella said, plenty of help out there. And you might find the very best of it in your pocket. Let's return to the studio to continue our conversation with Joanne, Belinda and Howard. And we've had a number of messages in when we were talking about this on Late Lunch from people who were also struggling. You mentioned one person messaged Jo asking about a symptom check. And this is something that you mentioned on the show. There are apps and things that you can get now, aren't there?
Yes,
that can help?
There are. Dr. Louise Newson is fighting the good fight. Menopause is very much her specialism, and she runs her own clinic, and I think online she's called the Menopause Doctor. And she has an app that you can go in and tick all the various boxes and then take that into your GP.
We also had this message in from someone who was saying, we're so glad that you're doing a feature on menopause. I'm 36 and in menopause at the moment, but can only take a very low dose of HRT due to other complications. It's really not fun. I'm so glad you're making people more aware of the symptoms. This is something you touched on, Belinda, about the fact that sometimes you can't take HRT because you might have complications, whether it's cardiac, whether really it's other conditions you have.
Yes, I can't imagine how that lady's coping. I've much sympathy for her.
Yeah.
But I suppose taking a low dose is better than not taking anything at all.
What about just coming in? Because again, I think you do see, and I've certainly read in recent years, you've seen HRT linked in with this increased possibility of various types of cancer. Is that still a concern for some women? Is that something they need to take into account, or is that something they can be advised on, or is it just not something you need to seriously consider? I don't know.
It depends on you as an individual. If you have the genetic risk of estrogen-sensitive breast cancer, estrogen-sensitive cancers, then yes, then likelihood is that you're not going to be able to take HRT. There's likely to be other conditions as well, and that will be a conversation to have with your GP. But just putting it into perspective, your relative risk of getting something like breast cancer is far greater if you drink more than the recommended amount every week. If you are somebody that carries more weight than you would like, then those are going to increase your risk far more than being on HRT.
That's interesting. That links in actually to another message that we had on late lunch. We had this texter who messaged to say, I was happy on HRT, but in 2018, my doc suggested I stop in case of breast cancer. I'm mid-60s, and since then, my bone density has dropped, even though it rose on HRT. I'm now sweating again. I asked recently if there's anything I could take, was given something called Estravil. Unfortunately, when I read the leaflet, it said there would almost certainly be memory loss in women over 60s, and I just cannot risk that. Where can I look for ideas, please?
Well, I'm on a synthetic hormone called Tibolone, which isn't actually estrogen or progesterone based. It was originally used for osteoporosis, and they found one of the side effects was it it takes away hot flushes and everything else. And that is recommended for people who've not had a period for at least 2 years, I think. It's a protagonist, so it actually makes your body produce more of its own estrogen and progesterone. So that might be something that this particular person could go down. It's been around for a long time, and my GP said this is probably one of the better ones to take if you're in your 60s.
That's very good advice. Thank you so much for that. And also another thing people can look at, Joe, that we touched on briefly was diet, maybe, nutrition.
Yes,
what sort of difference can that make?
Yeah.
Oh, vast difference. Yeah. There's even something as simple as managing your blood sugar levels. Unfortunately, our standard Western diet is highly, highly refined. In very simple terms, that means that the carbohydrates that we're consuming, all of our pastry and white bread and pasta and white rice and all that white beige stuff, there's not a great deal for the body to do in terms of digesting it. So the carbohydrate gets released into our system very, very quickly, can result in a blood sugar spike. Our body releases insulin to correct that high blood sugar, but it can be a correspondingly high release of insulin. We get an overcorrection, and we end up on this seesaw of blood sugar throughout the day. One of the knock-on effects as far as menopause is concerned is that seesawing, obviously over time, that is going to have an effect on just your energy levels, because you're going to be all over the place. Your concentration is going to be absolutely shot. This is kind of associated with, that mid-afternoon slump, after you've had your lunch and you really feel like you just need a little bit of a Bobies. This is your blood sugar just saying, like, basically wanting to, you just lie down. When we have that correspondingly low blood sugar from that overcorrection, at that point our body starts triggering a stress response. So we're getting adrenaline and cortisol being pumped out, high levels of those hormones associated with suppressed estrogen, so we're making a bad situation worse, and then high stress, more hot flushes, more anxiety, and over time, weight gain, etc., etc. And so even something as simple, that was a very long-winded way of saying, eat more fibre. So it's, if we eat a high fibre diet, then we get a nice, slow, steady release of blood, of the carbohydrate into our blood sugar, and everything stays a lot more balanced, and we're just not going to be flushing to the same extent or running the risk of weight gain, etc., etc.
I must admit, I do tend to follow a low-carbish diet, but with plenty of fresh vegetables and things for fibre, and I do feel a lot better for it.
That's good to know. Because, to be fair, a lot of the things that you mentioned with regards to symptoms here, a lot of them also link in with our mental health, don't they? Because a lot of the things we experience will impact on us visually. So in front of people, we may start sweating in front of them and flushing and feeling embarrassed about it. And then also, as you said, weight gain is a big issue for many women. Physically, you're so affected by it. So, I mean, the mental health is something we really need to look at as well here, isn't it, really? What's your experience with regards to that, Belinda?
Well, when I was going through, because I was so tired, I had the brain fog that we all talk about, but I would get very tearful over nothing, absolutely nothing. And I'd be at work and think, I can't cope with the patients today or whatever. And it was just dreadful. I just would leave the room and think, I just want to burst into tears now. And I think it's tiredness, which is the greatest thing, because you're not sleeping at night and sweating. And I tried everything, cool cushions, ice packs, quilt on, quilt off, and it's just a knock-on effect. And I think coping with it for 2 years was much longer than I should have done. I would say to people, don't leave it more than 6 or 7 months. If you really are having a bad time, like flashes every 20 minutes, go and talk about it. Go and see your GP. Get your diet sorted and exercise as well.
Yeah.
It's time to look after number one and not the rest of the family. You have to look after the family, but I think it's time. Most women are really bad about putting themselves first, and I think they should do.
That's so true, and it's absolutely the time for that.
Yeah.
It's that old thing of put your own oxygen mask on first,
Yes.
because we are so very often you're the glue to the family.
Yes.
But
Yes.
if you start to fall apart,
The rest of the family falls apart.
the rest. So you need to start being. You need to start being selfish.
Yes, and it's very hard. Very hard, I think.
And you mentioned that meditation was very helpful for you.
Yes, because that calmed me down, and I think I was taught very well to do it, and I still use it. I used to do it a lot after my husband died, so it's something that will carry with you for the rest of your life, and 10 minutes is all it can take sometimes.
Yeah, there's a ton of evidence supporting the very, very positive effects that meditation can have, and not just in menopause, obviously.
No,
but
for everything, for mental well-being.
And we were talking earlier on when we were talking to you on the show, Jo, and sort of saying, obviously for most people, for most women, their GP will be their first point of call going in. If they've done that and they've had something of a brush off, maybe, I like to think it doesn't happen that often, but I hear that it does, and they're told, it's the menopause. What do you want me to do? I'm not, I'm a GP, not a magician, and are sort of sent out again, not quite with a flea in their ear, but really with not a great deal of help. Where would you suggest they go then? Would you suggest going to another GP
within your practice?
Just say, go to another one.
There must be somebody, I would think, within every practice who is sympathetic towards it. And I honestly think today there aren't many GPs who aren't sympathetic towards it.
So it has improved quite dramatically over the years.
Definitely.
Well, the Hailwood Medical Centre in Onchan, here on the Isle of Man, is one such practice that can boast a very sympathetic and knowledgeable ear.
So my name's Stephanie Beynon. I'm a practice nurse and a non-medical prescriber.
And Steph, I've come to you and asked you to come and join us, and thank you so much for being part of this, because your name cropped up a number of times on some of the local menopause groups. And basically it was people saying, Steph is fabulous. She's really helped us. She's made a massive difference to us, which is fabulous to hear in itself. And I think you are one of those people that are a port of call for those going through the menopause. So we'll come to your sort of experiences of that with the women that you've met shortly. But I am of an age, 45 years old, where I am going to have to start considering this myself soon. So do you know what? I'm just going to put the question out to you there. What can I expect? Or is that just an impossible question because it's so different for everyone?
Well, it is. It's not a one-size-fits-all, and women's experiences are different. Women start to experience menopause at different ages, sometimes quite early on, and that can obviously be a familial thing sometimes. Sometimes a little bit later. And what one woman might be happy to live with and put up with might be an insurmountable problem for somebody else.
I can imagine.
And some things are easier to talk about than others.
That's interesting that you mentioned familial as well. I hadn't thought about that. So if you were to look to your mum, you might get an idea of what it might be like for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, that certainly seems to be the case.
Yeah.
Personally, I have 2 sisters, and I knew which one I was going to follow because my whole menstrual history followed one sister, the one who had the worst one, unfortunately. So, but yeah, I mean, if you can talk, if you've got a mum around who can tell you what her experience was, or older sisters who can tell you, and obviously friends as well, it will give you a good idea.
And talking about it, it's just so important, isn't it? And it's something we talked about with the ladies. I know you've listened to their conversation yesterday, Joanne and Belinda. The fact that people are now much more open. Yeah. It is something that's being discussed. And so in the time that you've been dealing with this in your practice, have you noticed a difference in women? Does it feel like they're more able to talk about it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly not an expert on menopause. I did some training myself relatively recently because I am a port of call for women. I'm doing cervical screening, I'm dealing with their contraception, and in the practice I work in, we don't have a female GP, and some ladies would prefer to talk to a lady, and I think some ladies find it easier to talk to a lady who they can see is probably going through the same experience.
So what has your own experience been then?
My menopause started at around the age of 50. Periods dwindled off. I was very uneducated. I'm quite happy to admit that. And I thought I'll do it all naturally. So I ate my own body weight in flax seeds and soya and all the rest of it, which did have some benefits in the short term, but not in the longer term. And then as I was seeing women and talking to women and realising that I didn't know enough to help people, so I did some training myself. And as a result of that, I hot-footed it down to my nurse practitioner at my surgery and had a chat to her. And I take HRT now. It's had a massive positive impact on me. So, but it's not all about HRT. It's about lifestyle as well and promoting good health and talking about it. I'm very encouraged. I have friends working in various industries on the island where their employers are now starting to bring people in to talk to them about menopause and make the staff more aware. And I think that's a huge leap forward. We weren't doing that 5 years ago.
No, definitely not.
So, that's really, really encouraging. I think there was a programme on TV a few months ago as well, the Davina McCall one,
Yes.
which I didn't actually watch. I had a surge of women come to see me after that programme thinking, oh, actually, I can get help.
Oh, it's brilliant that it does have that effect.
It's really good. And I know when I listened to the stuff you talked about with the other ladies, I think Dr. Louise Newsom was mentioned, my menopause doctor, fabulous website. She has an app which is called Balance, and there's a menopause questionnaire on there that you can do. So I would say, if there's any women who are thinking of coming to speak to a healthcare professional about their menopause and what they can do, have a look at that, get some information so that when you come and have that chat, you can make informed choices and reach that decision.
So what then would you say would be the sort of the signs that you start experiencing some of the symptoms that you think, okay, now would be a good time to actually go speak to someone?
Yeah, change in bleeding patterns. So periods maybe becoming heavier, more painful, or more scant and sporadic. Then obviously there's the vasomotor symptoms, the hot flushes, the night sweats, which can be really debilitating. Vaginal dryness, nobody wants to go and have a conversation about that. But sometimes that will come up when women come for cervical screening and they'll say, actually, my last smear was really uncomfortable. And it's very easy to actually correct these things. There are things that we can do to help that. Because you're having night sweats, you're not sleeping well, then you're irritable, you've got brain fog, you feel as if you're not maybe coping at work. And I saw quite a shocking statistic, which is that 50% of women either reduce their working hours or give up work because of the impact that menopause has on them. And I found that really startling. Because that has such an impact on both their financial health and future pensions and things, and also on the wider workforce. You're possibly losing all those skills, all that experience for something that there's help out there.
That's really quite shocking to hear, as you say, and I wonder if part of it is because one of the things we talked about with Belinda and Joe, as you heard, was the sort of visual impact of menopause, which maybe some women are sort of thinking, I don't want to go to work and look like I'm sweating and I'm hot and I feel uncomfortable and I'm in pain and I'm tired. Like I said, the brain fog as well, how it's affecting everything. So it sort of makes sense that some might come to that conclusion.
I had one lady who told me she was sticking kitchen roll down the back of her top before she went to work because she knew by the time she got to work she would be sweating, she would be uncomfortable, she didn't want her clothes to be sweaty. Women who they're very competent, highly skilled women who just feel like they can't manage.
And interestingly, the time of life that you are as well, if you have children, you might be trying to deal with that as well, family.
Exactly, yeah. And at the other end, elderly parents maybe needing more help, more support. You're trying to hold a job down, you're not sleeping, you're irritable. You may have intimacy problems with your partner because intercourse is painful, and so your relationships can suffer. It has a massive impact on women and their surroundings, their relationships, their working lives. There's so much it impacts on.
Yeah.
But, you know, there is help out there.
Which is great to hear. So from your perspective then, from as a medical professional, if I was to come to you and say that I'm really struggling with menopause, what can you do for me? What would be the first thing that you might suggest?
Right. So we would have a chat about your general health, because obviously we need to know where you're up to, any other medications you're on. Lots of women come and they say, I think I need a blood test, and it's not always appropriate to do a blood test. But we can discuss HRT. The hormone replacement therapy that's available now is what we call body identical, so it very much mimics your natural hormones. It's not the same as bioidentical preparations which you can buy on the internet, which don't have quite the same evidence behind them, but body identical, and I think keep it simple. So transdermal estrogens, very, very good. It can just be a gel, a patch, a spray. They don't increase your risk of breast cancer. They don't increase your risk of venous thrombosis. And then with that, depending on if a woman still has a uterus, then you have to protect the endometrium as well. So you would also need progesterone. So it's very much tailored towards your symptoms, your health, and what you need. So again, with the progesterones we use now, they're called micronized progesterones. They're breast friendly. They don't increase your risk of breast cancer. They can actually have a very positive benefit on your blood pressure and your cardiovascular risk, which we know increases after the menopause in women, as if we haven't got enough to deal with. And then things like, you know, pessaries and things that can help with vaginal dryness. Women get recurrent urinary tract infections, which can be a reason in itself for offering some form of HRT, whether it's just a localised or a systemic one. And there's lots of different ways you can deliver HRT as well. So if one thing doesn't suit you, you can come back and say, OK, that doesn't suit you, but we could try this. So there's lots of options around, and lots of safe options, and it also protects you in terms of your bone health and your cardiovascular risk in the future. Because 100 years ago, women's menopause happened average around 51. Average life expectancy for a woman was 59. So you had 8 years of it and then you popped off.
Oh dear.
Now our average life expectancy is 83. Your menopause is still around 51, so you've got 32 years. So you want 32 years of looking and feeling well, don't you?
Yes, please. So if we do go that route, though, we do decide to go the route of HRT, once you start taking it in whichever form, how long would it take to start having an effect?
It can have benefit. My ladies that come to me, I will usually see them after a couple of weeks just to see how they're getting on, and they're already feeling positive benefits from it.
That's great.
So it can kick in quite quickly. And the other thing is, there used to be a thing that you could stay on HRT for 3 years, 5 years, then you had to come off it. There's no reason. As long as your health doesn't change and you don't develop something new that makes it a contraindication, you can stay on HRT. It's perfectly safe for long-term use.
So it really has progressed over the years, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great to know. And as we were hearing yesterday, we were talking to the ladies, there was mention of some people who may not be able to take HRT for whatever reason, because there are certain conditions, aren't there, that
there
you
are,
can't?
There are. So obviously anybody with an undiagnosed or abnormal vaginal bleeding, you would want to be investigating that first. You wouldn't start somebody on hormone replacement if they were bleeding for a reason. Somebody with an active breast cancer or endometrial cancer wouldn't be suitable. Somebody who'd had an acute cardiac event recently wouldn't be suitable, or an active blood clotting event. again, things like that. Some people with certain liver conditions might not be suitable. But again, there are alternatives. I'm still very much learning, so I don't prescribe on that side of things. I'm sticking to the simple first line stuff at the moment until I get a bit more knowledge. But there are certainly alternatives.
And from what you've discovered, and I'm not expecting you to start naming these alternatives now, but from what you've discovered when you've been researching them, if you do have to go the route of alternative therapies, do they seem to make a difference from what you've looked at? Do they seem to actually have an effect?
Yes, they can. So sometimes they use things called SSRIs, which are used as antidepressants, but they can also have a bit of a benefit for the vasomotor effects. They can have some benefit on that, and other things like clonidine that can also help with hot flushes and things like that. So there is evidence there that they do have some benefits to them. And other things like, I think it's already been mentioned, sort of CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy can help. Hypnotherapy has been shown to have some benefits as well. Other things you can do, like if you smoke, give up, because it's never good anyway, and it's not good for your bone health. Yeah. Simple things, a good diet. I know Joanne's obviously discussed that in much more detail. She's much more aware than I am. Taking a calcium and vitamin D supplement to protect your bones if you can't take an oestrogen. Reducing your alcohol intake. Sometimes alcohol can exacerbate the hot flushes and things like that. So if you feel that you're drinking more than you should, then maybe address trying to deal with that. Exercise. So much evidence there on the positive effects of exercise for weight management, which was another important thing. Mm-hmm. Physical health, low impact weight bearing exercise such as walking with women, very, very good for your bones again.
Some excellent advice there, that quite simple things that you can do, to be honest, to really
so
sort of make a difference. So you can actually
take ownership of it yourself as well, and do lots of positive stuff. If you feel you've got brain fog and things, go out for a nice long walk, and mentally it does settle things down, doesn't it? Sometimes you can just clear your head, and I suppose that involves making time for yourself to do it. And I think that's something that I talk about with women as well, because they're all spinning loads of plates for all the reasons we've mentioned, and just to say, actually, if you fall down, the whole house of cards is going to come down around you. So take 20 minutes, or go and get your nails done, do something that makes you feel good, and look after yourself.
Good advice.
And ask for help when you think you need it.
And presumably as well, because we're talking about the family here, talk to your family about it.
Yes, yeah, very much so, very much so. But it's because it's not that, I'm sure it's not in the majority of cases that people want to ignore what's happening to you. But sometimes men might find it difficult to say, why is this? Yeah. Why is this happening?
As you say, it is the sort of thing that could really quite affect your relationship because of all of the different symptoms. So it is a difficult thing, but I have to say it's a very hopeful conversation we're having. It just proves that there is something that can be done about it, which is fabulous.
I think so, yeah. And I think using that blended approach between medical and non-medical interventions, it's probably the best way forward.
And with regards to the island itself, our island, are there many people? You say you've taken training. Are there many people who have that sort of training that people can go to if they're maybe not with? I know you're with Hailwood.
I think more so. I mean, the course I did was online. It was through Dr. Louise Newson, who, she's really pushing it up the agenda. Mm-hmm. And I was told by a colleague from another practice about this training. That's how I became aware. I passed it on to my colleague. We passed it on to a doctor in our practice. So, as word gets round, and there's also some talk about menopause actually becoming one of the part of the quality outcome framework in the UK for GPs and part of how they're funded and everything. So that will push it. If that happens, that will push it up the agenda as well.
One of the things we were saying yesterday, when you think that the amount of humans in the world that go through this, you think it should be at the top of the agenda, shouldn't it?
Yeah. Because, I think just from the chat we've had now, the impact on not just the lady, but the relationships, the working life, the wider society.
Yeah. It makes a difference.
So-
See, we women are making impact wherever we go, aren't we?
Of course we do. We always have.
So someone listening to this now, I know you've given some excellent advice already, but if there was a particular message you'd like to leave them with, what would you say?
Don't struggle on. You don't need to struggle on. There's help there. There's lots of help. You will make your own choice at the end of the day about what you're comfortable with, but go and have a chat to somebody about it.
That's the best advice we could have. Steph, thank you so much for talking with us today.
Thank you.
Many thanks to Steph Beynon from Hailwood Medical Centre. You're listening to the PauseCast, a programme all about the menopause, where we're hearing from a number of women from the Isle of Man and further afield who are sharing their journeys, experience and expertise to help us navigate the menopause maze and, hopefully, start a conversation in your household.
My name is Paula Briggs. I'm a consultant in sexual and reproductive health and chair-elect for the British Menopause Society.
It does seem at the moment, doesn't it, that it's something that everyone is talking about. And obviously today being World Menopause Day, even more so, it's good to sort of get that awareness out there. But I do love the fact that despite these negative perceptions, you are bringing us something of a positive take on menopause today.
Yeah, I mean, I'm absolutely delighted with the results of this survey. It's certainly not all bad news. I think the fact that women felt happiest, healthiest and sexiest at 53 is fantastic.
That is so good to hear. It really is. So tell us then about some of these sort of myths then that you mentioned, because as you say, a lot of the sort of negatives seem to get out there, but they're not all true.
No, they're not. They're not all true. So I think one of the things in the WHI when it was published in 2002 was that HRT caused breast cancer, strokes and heart attacks. And what the NICE guideline did to redress that was to talk about individualised care. So from a GP perspective, I think just listening to the patient is really important. And from the patient perspective, it's knowing where to go to get the right information. So I would definitely recommend Women's Health Concern, the patient-facing arm of the British Menopause Society, because the information there has been written by experienced experts. And we know what the patient is getting is the right information. And that's the difficulty with other information resources that are popping up really right, left and centre. And I think the social media thing is good because it has raised awareness, and World Menopause Day is all about raising awareness of menopause. And as you say, 50% of the population are going to be menopausal, and women will spend roughly a third of their lives post-menopause, and these should be the best years of their lives. I think the study, which was undertaken by women's health company Organon, found that women did appreciate stopping bleeding. And I really like the pearls of wisdom in the study. Things like stop trying to be perfect. It doesn't exist. Make time for yourself. Stay in touch with old friends. Always trust your gut instinct, and don't stay in a job if you don't have to. So I think, the expectation now with menopause care is probably slightly skewed to always being perfect, and that just doesn't happen. We all have things that make us feel up and down from day to day, and that's life, isn't it? So it's about giving women realistic expectations of how they're going to be when they're menopausal, with whatever form of treatment they choose to access.
Dr. Paula Briggs bringing us something positive, or menopausitive maybe. You can find lots more information on the British Menopause Society website, thebms.org.uk. And if you're looking for some support closer to home, there's an event this weekend. Here's Joanne Posey again to tell us more.
It's on the 6th of November, starting at 9:30, running through till 2. It's on at the Nobles Park Pavilion, up above the Talk of the Town. We have the run of the place up there. We have Dr. Wilson, as I've said, who is going to be giving just the long and the short on HRT, so running through all the various options, the risks, the benefits, the limitations, and responding to any questions that we have. Paula Dunlop she spent 20 odd years in the mental health side of things, in nursing, in the NHS. She's now in private practice, so she'll be coming in telling us how we can help manage our anxiety, low confidence, low mood, questions around self-identity. Obviously, I will be there covering just the basics of exactly what is happening, because that's one of the biggest questions is what on earth is going on with my body and why am I having all these symptoms? So I'll be covering off those basics and then obviously talking about how food can help and which particular food groups are going to be most useful. And then Esther Jones, yoga therapist, who will be focusing on pelvic floor. Very, very important area as we get older, linked in with the vaginal atrophy I've already talked about, but there are certain risk factors around weakness in the pelvic floor and then potentially going into stress incontinence. And so working on our pelvic floor, very, very important as we get older. And also then just looking at the relaxation side of things and giving us exercises we can do just day to day to help keep our stress levels low. And then we'll be having a fabulous lunch.
Of course, it's got to involve some great food. And it's really encouraging to hear you talk about this, because it basically sounds like, because as I said, for me, I'm approaching that age where, we've heard earlier there was someone in their 30s who's going through it. I'm now 45, and so I'm approaching that age where I am getting very nervous about this kicking in, I have to say. But this is giving me some hope, really, that there are groups out there, there's people out there, there is some support out there. I mean, Belinda, you were talking about when you first started experiencing this.
No support groups, nothing. Well, we talked about it amongst friends and that was it.
Yeah.
Nothing at all.
So how does it make you feel hearing this now?
Oh, I just think it's wonderful. The more you can talk about it and go to support groups or whatever, it's vital, absolutely vital. And then hopefully the menopause might even become something that's very copable with, and you just sort of gently go through it as it should be.
Please,
fingers
I've got
crossed.
Everything crossed.
But all the evidence...
And also to be able to have an informed choice of what you want to do and what's best for you.
100%.
And it's so important.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Everybody's different.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Oh, well, you did touch on briefly there, we were talking about as well, Jo, the mental health side of it. And I know that the mental health practitioner, Paula Dunlop, she also is an expert in hypnotherapy, which is quite interesting in itself, and also CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy. I know there was a documentary the BBC did some time ago at menopause, and they had a series of different options that groups of women could take, and it was determined that CBT was one of the best things you could do. So is this something that's going to be covered as well, do you think, at this event, or is it something that people should look at?
Yes, absolutely, 100%. I mean, as Belinda has alluded to, it's such a personal thing, and to have the choice and to know what range of options are out there, or even to start touching upon them, because... I mean, I wish we could have a whole weekend doing an event like this, and even then you'd only be skirting over the surface of what is possible. But yes, so there's lots and lots of evidence around the hypnotherapy and the CBT, as you say, and then this is all just about building up those new neural pathways and taking us out of that stress response to circumstances and building a more positive path for our brains to go down.
And one thing I was watching in this recent documentary, and I don't know, it was the BBC one you were talking about. Either way, it was interesting. And there was one fascinating and sort of curious part where they were again exploring different techniques, different methods, some alternative ways. So obviously we've discussed several here, but there are some other sort of herbal type remedies. And there was another woman they spoke to who was using magnets. Now, I'd never heard of this before.
Oh, yes,
quite literally,
yes.
but they were magnets.
You're putting in pants.
Which clicked
Didn't
onto your pants.
For me.
Quite literally. And so they were assuming right down sort of towards the ovary and lower. And she's like, but for her, they definitely worked. And they were talking to another woman who was saying, well, the jury's out on exactly how they may or may not work, but never underestimate the placebo effect.
Exactly.
And that if something works, as long as it's not doing harm and it actually works for a woman, or indeed whatever the case may be, then don't underestimate it. It's working for this woman. All it meant was she just had this, and she didn't mind doing it every day. It was discreet. I don't think it'd been massively expensive, and it worked.
Yeah,
Belinda,
I think that's
tried
the whole
them.
thing. So long as it's not doing harm, so long as it's not somebody closing down to something beneficial that they could be doing, then yes, absolutely, why not? Even if the science says that doesn't work,
it might not work.
It's like, well, it works for me.
Yes. Exactly.
Yeah.
The other thing I'd like to see, and I don't know whether it would be possible, would be to hold a morning where just men could go along, because perhaps they're happier in an all-male environment and they could be told of the symptoms. I mean, we're all in backgrounds where we know the symptoms, but I'm sure there are a number of men out there who aren't aware of the symptoms and how they can support their partners during that time.
I think I
would love to see that, and I would be quite happy to go along and give my experience and tell them.
And it's just that talking, actually, it's bringing it out, because there is still, I think, for some men, it's still, they feel...
the change, just going through the change.
They just do not feel happy talking about it.
Yeah. I think that's an absolutely fantastic idea, but it is something that I've talked about amongst my fellow experts. But there's still a question mark for me of what the take-up would be of something like that.
Interestingly, we did have a message in at the end of late lunch, which made me laugh to an extent. I think it was said with a nod and a wink. This came in at the end of late lunch. I'm not being funny. Why feel sorry for women who go through menopause early? This is after we had the message in from the 36-year-old. No periods. No one wanted or unplanned kids. And yes, I'm a bloke. I mean, what do you think of that, Jo?
Well, thank you for your contribution, Mr. Man. Thank you. Yes, just very informed.
Hopefully he'll listen to this podcast to find out a bit more.
Well, this has been so informative, and I guess what I would like to do is sort of wrap it up with, again, sort of returning to a message of hope, I guess, for women out there, either who are not yet going through the menopause and are nervous about it, or are going through the menopause and are really struggling. So, Joanne, what would you like to leave listeners with at the end of this podcast?
I think get yourself informed, and as much as you can, genuinely embrace it. Embrace it, and it's just the next stage in your life. Yes, it's an ending, but it's also a beginning, and you can put the rearing behind you and make it a time where you focus upon yourself and think of all the possibilities then of your future. As I say, I've done a couple of events before, and I always close with suggesting that it's a time when we go back to the person that we were before puberty, when we were optimistic and clear-sighted and anything was possible, and we were very, very true to the real us, and then it all got a bit messy. And then to find that young girl again, but add in to that individual then all your wisdom and your experience and your education and how powerful then that makes you. So yes, women in their 50s, watch out.
Belinda, what about you? What message would you like to leave people with?
I entirely endorse that.
That's fabulous.
And I would say, don't be afraid to go and see your GP. If you don't get a sympathetic one, find another one if you do take the route of taking HRT, because I'm living life now. And I'm 67. I don't know how much longer I'm going to be here, but I'm happy to do what I'm doing. I'm doing all sorts of things that I enjoy now because I'm retired as well. So go for it.
So there are things now that you're finding possible that you couldn't previously do when you didn't have HRT in your life.
Absolutely. Yes, I'm full of energy. I exercise every day. I do all sorts of sports. My friends say, "What do you ever sit down, Belinda?" So yes, go for it.
H, as our token man, what are you going to take away from this?
I think it's like anything, isn't it? I think it's try and be aware, try and be educated about it, and for heaven's sake, don't be embarrassed.
Well said. Yes. And we should remind people, Jo, about this event that is coming up. At the time of this recording, there's an event happening in November of this year, 2021. What is it? Where is it happening? And what can people expect from it?
It is the 6th of November, 9:30 till 2 p.m. at Nobles Park Pavilion here in Douglas on the Isle of Man. And we have 4 experts from different areas that are going to be there all day to answer all your questions and give you all the different strategies and tactics you need to help make your life better. And it's going to be fun, and there's going to be food.
Yay! And how do people sign up for it?
They can contact me, Joanne, at lifelessonsnutrition.co.uk, and I'll be delighted to point them in the right direction.
And that's where we'll press pause. I'm so grateful to my guests on this programme: Belinda Pilling, nutritionist Joanne Posey, Hailwood Medical Centre practice nurse Stephanie Beynon, Dr. Paula Briggs, chair-elect of the British Menopause Society, gynaecologist and menopause expert Dr. Ella Russell, our own interested male Howard Caine, and the ever-pithy, witty and wise Mrs. Yorkshire the Baking Bard, Carol Ellis. I'm Christy DeHaven, and I wish you well on your menopause journeys, whether they're your own or your partner's. The pause can be positive after all.